now get into the role of, and the decision makers are committees, I am assuming, where that's multidisciplinary. You probably have a pharmacist on it, a physician, maybe nursing. I don't know how you guys do it. So you do that, but now as someone who runs his own practice, how do you make the decision there? I mean, that's different now. You've got the global. Right. Now you have to decide which one you're going to use. So how do you do that?
So here is where actually the meat comes on table. So individual practice will make their own decision. So the decision is based on multiple aspects. One is the reputation of the manufacturers, because once you start treating patients with a drug A, drug B, drug C, we want to make sure that the company has a history of maintaining supply chain. That is first requirement. Second part is the patient assistance program, because a lot of these patients may or may not have adequate insurance. What kind of the support program do they have? What kind of resources do they provide to the practice to ensure that practice can sustain the support for the patients? And last thing is payer coverage, because each region has Medicare Advantage plans, you probably have MCOs, you have Medicaid, and commercial insurance, and there could be huge variations. So we factor all of these aspects before we make a decision about where we want to go, and we may end up in keeping 2 or 3 biosimilars at the same time.
Right. Okay, so it's not, the interesting thing, and we're going to come to this a little later, it's not just the cost. You figure, okay, they're all the same cost, but there's all these other things that go into it.
It does, yeah. The cost is just one part of that. The more we learn about biosimilars, the more I'm learning as well, is that cost is just one piece. There are about 4 other pieces of the puzzle that we need to solve to identify which is going to be best fit for our practice.
Got it. Okay, I understand that. And one other question before we kind of move on a little bit is that how do dosage and storing conditions compare with reference biologics? Do they really make a difference? Are they changed? I don't really think they are.
No, they typically don't change. So we've not seen any issues about dosage or storage conditions. So in general, I think we've not had any issues since we switched over to biosimilars.
Got it. And so so again, back to kind of the more global issue. So I'm assuming when a new biosimilar comes on the market, you'll meet with, say, the representatives of that particular biosimilar company, and they'll make a presentation about all of these various things that you go through. Yeah.
And we will discuss that even at the ION, at the business committee as well, and then make sure that, our expectations, our checkbox list is fulfilled. And then after we have meetings, I talk to my partners and then present it to our team and say, we have these 3 different choices we can make. Drug A has a better profile because the supply chain has been established. There's been no issue about, interference with the supply. The contract seems to be doable, and the payer coverage seems to be favorable as well. And the patient assistance program for us, with 20% patients either who are underinsured or Medicare only, we need to make sure that their patient assistance program are adequate.
Okay, that's important. So another thing you mentioned, I really want to kind of touch on too, is the education of the physicians.
Correct.
And I think that I agree, they don't know the difference between a generic and a biosimilar. And, we know that, and this is what I tell people, that a biosimilar, by law, has to be pretty much similar. It has to have, at least with whatever test you're doing or whatever small clinical trial, the same PK, in terms of the same pharmacodynamics. It has to have the same effect within a confidence interval. It can't be better. It can't be worse. There was a particular biosimilar in breast cancer, a trastuzumab biosimilar, where it was a bio-better.
Exactly.
And in fact, you have to be studied in a phase 3 trial. You can't just say, oh, it's a biosimilar. So, this is important. But I think the important thing, at least when I talk to my colleagues about it, is that it pretty much by law, by the regulations, has to be the same, pretty much. So it has to be the same pretty much efficacy, chemical structure as far as you can possibly do. And how do you find your colleagues responding to that?
And that's a very interesting topic you bring up, Adam, because when I spoke for the first time at one of the national meetings about 2 years back at the ION, one of the colleagues stood up and asked me why they are so expensive. Generics were not so expensive, so I had to take time to explain him that a generic drug is a small molecule which probably has about 180 to 300 Dalton atomic weight. Even look at the biosimilar, it's about 180,000 Dalton atomic weight. It's much more complicated. And the manufacturer has to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not like buying 1 kilogram molecule for $1 million and then start cutting pills or filling bottles. It's a lot more complicated to make. It undergoes rigorous evaluation as going back to totality of evidence, the immunogenicity, the comparator to the parent compound, and then they're approved. So it's a lot more arduous. It's not like going to assembly line and start filling the bottles.
Right. I agree with you 100%.